It's peas in a pod time. I mentioned Kevin Rudd and Malcolm Turnbull last night, I know. This pair, it's hard to find the words. They are locked down and dangerous at the moment. Their bitterness, their thirst for revenge, they just can't help themselves, destroying any semblance of dignity in their post-prime ministerial incarnations. Now, as you know, I looked at the similarities in these men and the strange bromance between the two former enemies in the documentary Men in the Mirror earlier this year. And I ended the doco by posing the question of what they might do next.
What really should Australia get from them that could be useful?
I think it's a big question in our country, isn't it? And it's been asked for many years. You know, how do we use our former prime ministers and are they properly harnessed? It seems to me that as a country we could get a lot more from Kevin and Malcolm, and they might feel a lot less resentful about their own demise if the country did find a way to get the best out of them. I'm amazed that John Howard continues to be so positive, and I note that Bob Hawke was never someone to throw rocks at the government of the day in his time after the prime ministership. But they'd probably actually satisfied their ambitions, and I think these two men, they left politics with their ambition unsatisfied.
Yes, indeed. It was kind of a prescient question to raise, wasn't it? But who would have guessed they would continue to be wreckers, even using the pandemic? They want to hurt the politicians who have done better than them, I suppose. And even with Australia coming through the pandemic better than just about any country on the planet, they're not above using vaccination procurement during this pandemic as a vehicle for their bitterness. Rudd has now spoken about his conversation with Pfizer and his letter to the PM, conveniently leaked to the ABC, who attempted to give him credit for bringing vaccine deliveries forward.
The bottom line is I'm just glad that we've had some bring forward of the Pfizer deliveries to the long-suffering Australian people. And for Mr Hunt, rather than him having a chuckle about all of this, frankly, he needs to get real about his job. And frankly, without any sense of self-respect, he'd resign as Health Minister for presiding over what Malcolm Turnbull has described as the biggest failure of public policy in this country's recent history.
Wow, that's a big claim, isn't it? Rudd must have forgotten what he did with this nation's borders and its climate policy. Oh, and its school halls and pink bats, and then there was the NBN. Just extraordinary stuff, isn't it, during a pandemic? And we get this pettiness. Turnbull too chimed in.
Malcolm Turnbull joins us now. Malcolm, Greg Hunt says Rudd's meeting made no difference and they already had it in the bag. Do you accept that?
Well, it's characteristically graceless. But look, the reality is Rudd's never claimed to have got the supply accelerated. The thing that it draws out of this is the fact that neither Morrison nor Hunt ever spoke to the head of Pfizer.
So the claims about what Rudd achieved have kind of toned down a bit, haven't they? But the political venom has not.
They had the deal stitched up to get not enough vaccines. They had the deal stitched up so well in Sydney, we're locked up. I mean, let's face it, this is an epic fail. It's the biggest failure of public administration in my recollection.
Again, we'd all like more vaccines right now, but has Turnbull forgotten his own role in climate and energy policy failures? And has he not seen how Australia is faring in the pandemic compared to other countries? And have a look at this. Have a look at how Turnbull and the ABC read from exactly the same script.
Pfizer released a statement this afternoon saying that no third parties had been involved in the contractual agreements, which was never suggested in the article or by Mr Rudd. Mr Hunt declined to be interviewed by this program tonight. Mr Rudd's intervention, however, does raise questions for the government. Why hadn't the Prime Minister engaged with Pfizer's global operation when other world leaders were doing so? This compares with the 55 phone calls to world leaders he made on behalf of Matthias Cormann's bid for the job of OECD Secretary-General.
Why wouldn't you go to the top? If you were the Prime Minister of Australia, and I was, you'd know that anyone in the world will take your call. Why wouldn't you make that call? I mean, if you're happy to make 55 calls, apparently, to get Matthias Cormann onto the OECD.
Same angle, same lines, probably the same intent. You got to love that public broadcaster, don't you? So apart from showing how two former PMs continue to damage their own legacies, this little episode gives us an additional insight. It goes to show how unbiased the ABC is. In order to attack a federal coalition government, it will work with disaffected former prime ministers from both sides of the political fence.